President of the Golden Gate Association of Health Underwriters. Welcome to today's event. This is really the first opportunity that we've had this year to do what we have called our Bay Area Association of Health Underwriters Bay Area Partnership. This partnership is between Golden Gate Association of Health Underwriters, Silicon Valley Association of Health Underwriters, and our North Coast Association of Health Underwriters. So welcome. You might be from one of those chapters, or you may be joining us for the first time as a non-member, but just joining to attend today's event. We want to welcome you. So as president of the Association of Health Underwriters, I am the chief executive officer of the chapter, and I have the overall responsibility for the chapter's affairs. The buck stops here with me. Well, at least the budget dollars, I'll say. I have been a member of the association since the 1990s. I started out my career with Silicon Valley Association of Health Underwriters as the membership chair and retention chair, a position that I thoroughly enjoyed because at the time I was a carrier rep and I was traveling up and down the coast, visiting with brokers and recruiting them to be a part of the association. I've also been a hospitality chair. And hospitality chair was probably my absolute favorite position because I love to throw a party. And so as hospitality chair, it allowed me an opportunity to be the host at many of our events. I enjoy being a part of the board, mostly because of, like today, the legislative updates that we get. It allows me to share those updates with my clients, as well as stay very attuned as to what is going on within our industry, as well as the professional development. The professional development has allowed us to, or allowed me personally, to receive my REBC designation within the organization. And then most of all, what I really enjoy about the Association of Health Underwriters is the network of insurance professionals and the community that we serve. And so that's why I've joined, and I look forward to a great event this morning. And so with that, I'll give it to you, Rick.
Thanks very much, Kenneth. I'm Rick Coburn. I'm the Professional Development Chair. I'm past president of GGAHU, past president of GGAHU. And I've been a member of GGAHU and NAHU for over 25 years. I'm going to be introducing all the GGAHU board members who will give a brief introduction about themselves and what they do. So first of all, immediate past president Sue Wakamoto.
Hi, as Rick said, I am the immediate past president, which means I kind of do not a whole lot in GGAHU anymore. I also am the VP of the PAC for CAHU, the California State Association, and I am currently the national chair for the Vanguard Council. So that's at the national level. Welcome, everybody, and I hope you enjoy our event today.
Next, Kathy Little as treasurer.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Kathy Little. Sue's lying when she says she doesn't do a whole lot for the chapter. She does a tremendous amount of work as past president and serves on many committees with NAHU and CAHU. And I as well have served in the local chapter for a number of years. I was past president as well. I've been in the role of secretary for a while now in just helping to support our local chapter and also supporting Kenneth in professional development. I also serve on the CAHU State Board as the finance director. So very happy to be continuing to serve my professional association and this organization in particular, and all my colleagues on the Golden Gate Association. So welcome, everyone.
Next, I'd like to introduce Janet Powelson, who is our legislative chair.
Good morning, everybody. So this event is key, essential for me and what I do in my daily work, and this is now my third year serving in this position. And our main events being the Capitol Summit in Sacramento and Capitol Conference in DC. we had our last one in person in DC, and then we went virtual, and the virtual seems to be the future. And so I'm looking forward to having that transition with all of you and scheduling meetings with your representatives in the near future. Stay tuned.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Jonathan Welsh, who's the membership chair. Jonathan?
Thanks, Rick. My name is John Welch. I've been the membership and/or retention chair for the last 3 years for GGAHU. I look forward to meeting all of you members, and I appreciate your membership to GGAHU, and hope you appreciate all the benefits. Recently sent a survey out, so hopefully looking forward to you taking the time to fill that out, complete it, so we can better serve you, our membership.
Okay, it looks like I have, it looks like all the GGAHU board members have been introduced. Is there anybody else that I missed today? No, just a brief comment about what I do. I am the educational and programs chair, and what I do is look for opportunities such as this one. And I'm responsible for finding and presenting educational programs for the professional development of chapter members. Ken, perhaps you can ask if there's any other board members from GGAHU or NACAHU.
Absolutely. If there are any board members from either North Coast or GGAHU, if you'd like to do a quick introduction.
Hello, this is Marty Murray with North Coast Association Health Underwriters, and I'm here, and I thank you for extending the invitation to everyone. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate you as well. Any other board members on the line today that would like to make a quick comment?
Morning, Candace. Michael Trainer from Silicon Valley Association. Thank you for putting this together. Looking forward to the presentation.
Thank you, Michael. Well, with that, we won't. Pat Burns, are you on the line?
I don't believe he is, so we can move on to Marcy.
Perfect. So today we have Marcy Buckner. Marcy is the Vice President of Government Affairs with the National Association of Health Underwriters. In this role, Marcy manages the association's state government affairs team, including the monitoring of activities of all state legislators, insurance departments, and intergovernmental organizations to coordinate efforts to advance the interest of professional health insurance producers. In addition, she serves as the association's liaison to federal agencies such as the Department of Health and Human Services, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Internal Revenue Services, and the Department of Treasury. Marcy is also the staff liaison to NAHU's Legislative Management Team, Legislative Council, and Legislative Council working groups. Marcy received her Juris Doctor from the New England School of Law in Boston, Massachusetts, and her Bachelor's of Arts degree in Political Science and History from the College of Charleston in South Carolina. Marcy, welcome.
Thank you. And if you can enable my share screen, I will put my slides up. It's a pleasure to be here with you all remotely. And as Janet mentioned, we will be doing our Capitol Conference remotely in February, but we're going to have a lot of really exciting new things that we're going to be able to do because we are doing it virtually. So I think we're really going to have an enhanced experience for that. And so, okay, is my screen up?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Just want to make sure. I've had some problems with that in the past. Faith and I can relate on that. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what is going on in DC, and then also what is happening with some of the races across the country. And of course, we can't have any presentation without talking about COVID-19. And we have had a number of pieces that have already passed, starting earlier this year in March and then through April and early May. We had the first phase, which really was trying to put some economic relief into place, followed by the Families First Act, which had a lot of pieces in it for extending FMLA, also more funds for unemployment. That was followed by the CARES Act, which put into place those PPP loans, the Paycheck Protection Program loans, that I know many of you have either obtained yourselves for your agencies or have helped your clients to be able to get them. And then the last big piece of coronavirus legislation, excuse me, that went through was just an additional piece of funding for the PPP loans. And since that time, we've really seen a stalling in trying to get anything passed. We have had some different proposals. We've had the HEROES Act from the House side, and this is very much Democratic led. And some of the pieces here that have been deal breakers on the Republican side are things like 100% subsidies for COBRA coverage. And we'll talk about why that's important in a few minutes. Another piece that would include is the ability to roll over an increased amount in FSAs. And the thought behind that is that many people haven't been able to use all of their FSA money because of the limitation on any treatments that aren't an emergency and not being able to do a lot of elective treatment this year. And as you all know, if you don't use it, you lose it on your FSAs. So we're hoping that they'll take action on this by the end of the year. On the Senate side, they do have a lot of similar pieces to the House, although they don't have those pieces for COBRA or for the FSA rollover, but they do have an increase in funding for state and local state and local governments. And you'll see here, there are some pieces where they're actually in agreement, which sometimes can be rare these days. And they have extended their conversations coming up to this point in October. There was a push to try to get something done before the election. We have heard that that is off the table at this point. We probably won't see any agreements go through Congress until after November 3rd. And at this point, they have somewhat agreed on what that target amount is, on how much they will come together and agree on spending for this bill. It's really what they're spending the money on that they're continuing with negotiations. And some of those negotiations include what the Senate unveiled earlier in October, late September, and unfortunately, this did not end up passing. And although it did include increased funding for PPP loans and unemployment benefits. And then the House Problem Solvers Caucus also kind of took their shot at trying to get people to come together. The House Problem Solvers Caucus is a bipartisan group, so Republicans and Democrats on the House side, and they work on a number of different projects. So not just healthcare, not just COVID-19, but they pride themselves in having a common sense solution to many of the big issues in Congress. And this was their attempt at trying to get a consensus, and unfortunately that did not go forward either. Then we had the House pass their $2.2 trillion bill. This did not go forward in the Senate. And it was really about that, that target money piece. So right now it's looking like they are going to negotiate down to about a $1 trillion bill. And then, like I said, they're negotiating on what exactly they're going to be spending those funds on. We've seen a lot more action, though, on the regulatory side, because it is a little bit easier to get things passed through the agencies. And one of those big pieces is an extension of the COBRA election period, as well as a deferral for payments of premiums, and extra time for employers to get out those election notices for COBRA. And so with this, the reason why it's really important that Congress is talking about subsidizing COBRA is because, I'm sorry, can you all still hear me? There's some construction going on outside. If I can just get a thumbs up from somebody that my sound is still okay. Okay, I got a thumbs up. Good, thank you. I'm never really sure how much comes in. I actually live right beside the National Zoo, so they're doing some landscaping, it seems. So the reason why it's so important with COBRA for Congress to be talking about subsidizing it is because of these extensions. And there are a lot of employers that are concerned that they are going to have trouble financially being able to subsidize COBRA and to help their employees to stay on COBRA for possibly a longer period. And then because they're able to retroactively elect COBRA, there's also a concern that people will wait until they do get sick to go onto COBRA, and then there are going to be these retroactive claims coming through, and just a lot of confusion on how that is going to be able to be resolved. But like I mentioned, Congress has not passed anything to subsidize COBRA at this time. We did submit a list of suggestions to several agencies with the administration, trying to seek out some relief both in the individual and employer market, and really looking at the employer market on some of the pieces with employer reporting that could be really difficult at this time. And so we did get some responses on our requests, and there were some rules that came out that allow for flexibility for Section 125 plans to do mid-year changes. Also, deferral and the deadline for Form 5500 filings, and some other pieces, but not quite exactly all of the things that we had in mind that we would like to see them change. Another one that they did release was a slight increase in the amount that folks can roll over in their FSAs. The limit is 500. They added 20%, so an extra $50 that you can roll over to next year. That wasn't quite what we had in mind when we asked for an increase in funds to roll over on your FSAs. We like the House version, which is about 2,750. So we're still asking for more action on that. And then because we've had such a stalemate in Congress in trying to get anything passed, President Trump did take action by releasing some executive orders. You'll see here, and I'm really just going to focus on that first one, although the other three below it are also important and can have some impact on you and your clients. But the first one, that action to defer payroll taxes for those within that income bracket, I just want to spend a little time on this because it's been confusing with how it has been reported. And so leading up to this executive order, there was a lot of talk about a payroll tax holiday. This is not a payroll tax holiday. I want to be really clear about this. It's a deferral. And so if you have an employer clients and they have their employees coming to them saying that they're interested in this, they'd like to participate in this deferral, they need to understand that these taxes will become due at a later date. And it's not a holiday. And there are also some concerns about employers that do participate in this, and then they have employees that leave, and how are they going to be able to recoup those funds from the payroll taxes that were deferred from an employee that no longer works for them? Is that going to be something that's going to be possible? So a lot of different things to think about when you're looking at this, and the most important is to make sure that employees, if they're participating in this, that they understand that this will be due at a later time. And then we've had some tweets. We know that this administration likes to govern through tweets. some tweets about trying to get to a final deal. At first, Donald Trump was tweeting that that Nancy Pelosi isn't coming to the table. They're not going to be doing anything on a stimulus bill before the election. And then we had further tweets that they were going to do something on COVID-19, but now I'm looking at the calendar, that's just not possible. We also know that because the Senate is busy with a Supreme Court nomination, the negotiations on the Republican side have been through Secretary Mnuchin, Secretary of the Treasury. He's been representing the Republicans in the negotiations with the House Democrats. So also just kind of one step removed from making sure that the Senate Republicans are on board since they're negotiating through Secretary Mnuchin. So now to the more exciting pieces, right? The political outlook with the races, and hopefully you all have your wine or ice cream ready for tonight for the debates, whichever way you need to cope, or both. I think some people will have. So obviously, Vice President Biden has clinched the nomination for the Democratic side of the ticket. And he is chosen as his running mate, Kamala Harris. The most often question I get with her is about her views on healthcare and whether that will influence Vice President Biden. And in the past, Kamala Harris has talked about supporting a Medicare for All program or single payer program, really using the line of doing away with private insurance companies. And even though this is something that she was talking about during the primaries, oftentimes candidates run very far out on the borders of their political party to try to get in some of those that are on the outside fringes of those parties. And then when we get to the actual election, they come very much more towards the center to try to get folks from the other side, those moderates, to join them on voting day. And I think this is what we're going to see with Kamala Harris, with her position on healthcare. But also, it's important to keep in mind that Vice President Biden does see healthcare as one of his expert issues. So it's not likely that Kamala Harris will be able to sway him too much on her views for healthcare, because Vice President Biden is really going to stick to his guts on where he is with his plan, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then, of course, President Trump is running as the incumbent on the Republican ticket with Vice President Pence alongside him. And these are some projections for the Electoral College. I am not very optimistic about the polling for president. The polling for Congress and is much more accurate, I believe. I think we all learned our lesson from 2016 about this. I've also seen oftentimes that folks are talking about that the electoral projections are much harder to do. You can look at where the voters are, but projecting the actual Electoral College is much more difficult. And oftentimes I suggest there's a great children's book, and I'm not suggesting that you have to go to the children's level to understand this, but it's a book I give to all of my friends with children, and it's called Grace for President, and it really breaks down how the Electoral College votes, which for a children's book is amazing. So if you have children or grandchildren that have questions about this, I recommend that book as a way to explain to them how this election process works. My own nieces have it. And so looking at the platforms between the two different candidates, there are some similarities here, but obviously some major differences. Vice President Biden would like to see the ACA upheld and make some extensions onto the ACA. in his original plans with President Obama, the plan with the ACA was to include a public option. And this is something that he is continuing to discuss as a possibility should he be voted into the White House. And there have been some different talks about this. So a public option is a plan, a market that runs alongside the private market that people are able to decide if they want to buy into. And within the public option, there are private carriers and they will have government negotiated rates. So it's different than in the exchanges where in the exchanges, those aren't government negotiated rates. Technically, they should be offering the same plans outside of the exchange as they are in the exchange. And with a public option, there's not that requirement. There's also the proposal of lowering the age of eligibility for Medicare and making this optional as well, so that those age 60 and up would be eligible for Medicare, but those ages 60 to 65 would have a choice and wouldn't be required to go into Medicare. Both of them are looking at ways to have the government negotiate Medicare prescription drug rates. Both of them are interested in prohibiting surprise billing, as well as, again, looking at drug prices across the board. So then on Donald Trump's side, he, of course, is interested in eliminating the ACA, either through the judicial system, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, or through continuing with different executive orders and actions from the administration. Things that we've seen from the past 4 years, like extending the length of time for short-term medical insurance, although I know California nixed that, expanding association health plans. All of those things are ways that there has been some chipping away of the ACA. And then again, he is interested in lowering those drug prices and eliminating surprise billing. When we shift over to look at the House and Senate races, which again, we do have a better, I think, handle on the polling, although it is changing quite often. We have 232 Democrats currently in the House and 197 Republicans. The magic number in the House to get something passed when the House is full is 218 or a simple majority. So that's important to keep in mind. Also, to do a kind of little Civics 101 review, the House members are up for re-election every 2 years, so everyone in the House is running. The projections right now are for 220 Democrats, 191 Republicans, and 24 toss-ups. So the reason why this is important is because when we take those toss-ups into consideration, we are still going to have a pretty slim majority, not super tight, but it is likely that the Democrats will have more than 218. So they will have a majority where if they vote as a block, they can get something through the House. But it isn't going to be so large that they're going to be able to really dominate, especially if they have some Democrats that defect and don't vote on party lines. So they are still going to have to work in a bipartisan manner to be able to get anything passed. On the Senate side, currently there are 53 Republicans and 47 Democrats. Your Civics 101 here, Senate runs every 6 years, but they don't run all at the same time. So it's kind of a rolling situation. So 35 seats are up for re-election this year, 12 are currently held by Democrats and 23 by Republicans. And the breakdown here is 46 Democrats, 50 Republicans with 4 toss-ups. And I've also seen some recent polling showing of those 4 toss-ups going Democrat for a pure 50-50 split. So the magic number in the Senate is 60. You need 60 votes to get anything passed through regular order. Neither party has that right now, and it's not likely that either party will have that after the election. So they will have to work in a bipartisan manner to get anything passed. There are some special situations, like with reconciliation, they're able to do this once a year, and the bill through reconciliation has to do with the budget. And through that special process, they're able to pass a bill through a simple majority with 51 votes. So that is where it will come into play for either party. If it's not a pure 50-50 split, if someone does get a majority of just over 50, it will be important for things like reconciliation, and then also things like Supreme Court nominees, which also only need a 51 vote majority to confirm. And really the point of all of that is that it's going to be very hard to get anything that is really far out on either side of the parties passed. So with the concerns of Joe Biden looking at a public option, looking at a road or a roadmap, setting the table for a possible Medicare for All plan, none of that is going to get passed with a Senate that doesn't have over 60 Democrats, and we're not going to see that. So it's important to point that out specifically when we're looking at the issues and the likelihood of getting things passed. So what we can expect through the end of this year, President Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett for the Supreme Court, and the dates here are already out of date. So we did see the Senate Judiciary Committee voted today on October 22nd. So our expectations there were correct. They did approve her out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. They actually are moving up the vote for the full Senate vote on her nomination. And they'll be doing hearings tomorrow with the hopes of having a full Senate vote on Monday. So Monday will be a very special day to look at to see if she is confirmed. Right now, there are only 2 Republicans that have said they're not comfortable voting for her right now, or voting for a nomination in general right now, because we are in the midst of an election. But the Republicans can afford to lose 2 and still have a 51 majority to be able to have her confirmed. So we'll look to Monday to see if that comes true. And then in the lame duck session, so after the election, we are expecting, like I mentioned earlier, a COVID-19 bill. We're also expecting, so just a couple of weeks ago, the Congress passed legislation to continue to fund the government, their budgeting bill. And the next time they have to vote on the budget is December 11th. So they have to vote on that day for a big budget bill to continue to fund the government. The reason why this is important is it's a must-pass bill, and this is oftentimes our bill that we can latch onto at the end of the year to try to get other pieces included. So, for example, last year, the December 2019 budget bill included the repeal of the Cadillac tax and the HIT tax, 2 things that we had been working on for quite some time, and we were able to get it passed because we attached it to the budget bill. So this year, the thought is that there's a possibility of attaching something on surprise billing to the budget bill. So we'll be watching very closely on that, and keep an eye on your emails for some Operation Shouts that we'll be sending out on that. And then there's another Medicare bill that is being put together, a big Medicare package. And we have been successful in getting this, having our legislation on having COBRA treated as creditable coverage added into this big Medicare bill, and it has passed out of House committees. So it's going to the House floor after the election, and then to the Senate. So those are some of the priorities that NEHU has been working on that we do have a chance to see possibly pass during the lame duck session. And that is all going to depend on the election and whether there is an expected change of power in the chambers going into January when the new Congress is seated. So then also looking at the regulatory side, I mentioned earlier the sheer number of regulations that have come out for COVID-19. There have been regulations on other things. I know it doesn't seem like it. And President Trump has also been very busy with executive orders. I don't know the statistics, but I think it's been the most executive orders out of a president, especially this year. And so we saw a number of executive orders on prescription drugs. One allowing for prescription drugs to be imported from Canada, another requiring lower rates for insulin and other drugs to treat diabetes, others that would do away with the Medicare kickback or rebate rules. And these are all executive orders asking for the government to take action and write proposed rules. So currently we have a proposed rule that focuses on the cost of insulin. So that executive order has been acted on, as well as another proposed rule on the reimportation of drugs. So the others are what we're waiting on to see some proposed rules on before we can comment. So executive orders don't have the weight of law. They just direct the agencies or Congress to take action. Another series of executive orders that we got were an executive order asking for the agencies to act to preserve pre-existing conditions in the case that the Supreme Court overturns the ACA and the Texas v. US or California v. Texas lawsuit, which we'll talk about in a second. This was largely a messaging executive order because the time frame does defer it until we have a decision from the Supreme Court, which isn't likely until June. So this was mostly a way for President Trump to get on the record stating that he supports coverage for pre-existing conditions ahead of the election. Another executive order that he released asks the agencies to act in the event that Congress does not pass legislation by the end of the year to end surprise billing. It doesn't say how they would like that to be resolved, just that if we don't have a bill by the end of the year, he's asking Secretary Azar from HHS to act to end surprise billing. So this just kind of puts some pressure on Congress to get that surprise billing language into that December 11th end of year bill. And then he's also signed executive orders to help support broadband extension for boosting rural health through telehealth. I think something that we've all experienced through COVID-19 and one of the areas that they're are liking to see extended. We recently submitted comments on another proposed rule, which would allow for HSAs and HRAs to be used for direct primary care and for membership in healthcare sharing ministries. We also were able to testify before the IRS on this. Mark Gagne, our Vice Chair of Legislative Counsel from NAHU, testified on this, and we are supportive of the use for these for direct primary care specifically. And then on the judicial side, aside from the big vote expected on Monday for the Supreme Court nominee, all eyes are on the Texas v. US case or California v. Texas. It's the same case. And this, of course, is the challenge to the individual mandate of the ACA. And so the challenge is that because in the December 2017 budget bill, so I think we're all seeing how important these December budget bills are. In the December 2017 budget bill, Congress zeroed out the individual mandate penalty. And so there is a challenge saying that because the Supreme Court previously upheld the individual mandate and said it wasn't a pure mandate because a tax was being levied, so it was actually a tax. Now that the tax is zero, there's the argument that now it's a true mandate, and that is unconstitutional. So that's the big question at hand. And then the secondary question on that is whether if the individual mandate is found to be a true mandate and unconstitutional, whether they can sever or take away just that part of the law and let the rest of the law stand, or if that piece of the law is found to be unconstitutional, does the whole thing fall down? And so I like to say, when explaining severability, my analogy is it okay to cut off the bad part of the avocado and eat the rest of it? Or if there's a bad spot on the avocado, do you have to toss it all out? And so that's really what we're going to be looking at here. If Judge Barrett is confirmed prior to November 10th, she will be included on the panel of judges that will hear this case. Oral arguments are expected on, or are scheduled for November 10th, and then an opinion is expected in June of 2021. So it will be quite some time until we see something there. And with a little insight on that, Justice Barrett was a student, and her mentor was Justice Scalia, who in the past has voted against upholding the ACA. He often called it SCOTUS scare, implying that the Supreme Court was doing everything within their power to uphold this law, and doing so with great legal gymnastics. So there is a theory that she would vote along the same lines as Scalia with this case. But there are some other insights where we could possibly see Justices Kavanaugh and Roberts actually vote with some of the liberal justices, because in the past they have upheld other cases that had to do with severability. They weren't ACA cases, so that might be a reason why they could rule differently. But in the past, they've agreed that you can cut off the bad part of the avocado and eat the rest. So there is a thought that they would see that as a possibility here. And so we would just see the individual mandate fall and the rest upheld. But again, June of 2021 is when we're looking for that decision. And I know I'm short on time, so I'm going to wrap up very quickly. If you are joining us and you are not a member, I encourage you to join us. We do have a lot of ways that you can stay informed on all of the things that I've talked about. We have our NEHU Healthcare Happy Hour podcast. It's available on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. It goes out every Friday, so you can keep up with what's going on here in DC. And we often have lots of fun special guests. The Washington Update is an email newsletter that goes out every Friday, and it's also individual content from NEHU. Every morning, the NEHU Newswire goes out with Associated Press hits on what is going on in the health insurance market. We also have a special Monday COVID-19 update that lets you know of any updates on guidance, regulations, legislation that has come out that could influence your clients. And then of course, a vast amount of webinars and a whole section of our website dedicated just to coronavirus information. I also encourage you to get engaged. I mentioned earlier, we'll probably have some Operation Shouts going out later this year on surprise billing. This is what it looks like. It goes to you, and it's an easy way for you to just put in your zip code and send a message to your member of Congress asking them to support legislation that we are interested in. And then we also have a number of educational resources. And I think Kenneth mentioned this earlier with his REBC designation and others that you can earn here. And so with that, I'll wrap it up. I don't know if I have time for questions, but if not, I will send it over to John Welsh with membership, and he can tell you all why you should be a member with all of this great information that we've provided.
Thank you, Marcy. Sorry.
I was going to say, Marcy, you do have a few minutes. There was a question from Kathy Little. Kathy, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question of Marcy.
Sure. Hi, Marcy. This has been something that has been weighing on me as I've been helping a lot of clients in the individual marketplace get subsidized health insurance when they were laid off early in the year. And as you know, the federal government allocated an extra $600 a week in pandemic unemployment relief for a period of time. I believe it was 12 weeks, approximately, on top of regular unemployment. So here in California, if you were getting regular unemployment at the maximum of $450 a week, plus the $600 a week, that's going to put somebody in a much higher income bracket potentially, right? And so that lowers their subsidy, which means during the time when they need the low cost insurance the most, they're paying a higher amount if they reported it. I happen to know a lot of my clients who started their unemployment early in the year, didn't yet have the unemployment pandemic relief, never submitted a change report, okay, which they're supposed to do. But nevertheless, because people are struggling financially, nobody wants to pay higher insurance if they don't have to. So at the end of the year, or next year, when they go to file their taxes, they are potentially looking at a huge payback. So at a time when the government is giving them money in one pot, they're going to be clawing it back in another pot. And I'm just wondering if anybody on the Hill is taking a look at this, is even aware of this situation, and how they plan to address it.
Yeah, so they are, and one reason why they're aware is because in April we told them about this, and cautioned them and said, not just with the issue of the change in unemployment amounts that they're getting because of the stimulus packages, but also just warning them that so many people are going to have a change in employment, period, that they're not going to be able to estimate their yearly income, especially if they're coming from a high income job that's been completely eliminated and they're unemployed the rest of the year. And so we caution that, like you said, at tax season, it's going to be very difficult for them even to file their taxes. And then there's the possibility that they could owe a lot of taxes, like you're pointing out. So one of the solutions that they're looking at right now, and it is in part of the negotiation for the COVID-19 bill that hopefully we'll see after the election, is to allow people, if they have lost their job, to apply for, to go to the exchanges and apply for the subsidy at 138% of poverty level. So regardless of what they could expect to make, that will be the rate that they file for. And then, so then at least they're getting that reduced rate in their insurance. And then if they have a change in their income, they would report it later. So that is the current plan. It's definitely not perfect, but it is something that could help. So it is part of the discussion here, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy. All righty, John, go ahead.
Thanks, Sue. Hi, everyone. John Welch, GGAHU Membership and Retention Chair. I would like to thank Marcy and Faith for providing today's information, and just goes to show you one aspect of the value of your membership here as a GGAHU member. We have sent out a survey to both chapter members and to members that have left us over the last year. We want to make sure that our lineup matches your interest and get a better idea of what you all are looking for in the content and in the events that we're offering you. So please take time to complete the survey. There's something in it for you, a drawing for a gift card. But the information that we gain from that will allow us to bring to you value and add value to your membership. As we continue in this COVID state, and getting together via mixers events is even now more valuable to be as one. Thank you all for your time and thanks for attending today. I now turn it over to Janet Paulson, our Ledge Chair.
Thank you, John. So one of the programs that we have is called Adopt a Ledge, so adopt a legislator. And I am seeking members who would like to participate in virtual meetings with their representatives, and either at the state or federal level. So if you have any interest in doing this, and it's based on where you live, not where you work, please, and reach out to me. J Powelson at bbnca.com. You can find us on the GGAHU website as well, all my contact information. So I am recruiting for people to participate in those members. So hope to hear from you all soon.
Great, thanks, Janet. And really quickly, I'm going to speak for Pat Burns. Pat Burns is actually our PAC chair for Golden Gate, but seeing as to how I'm the California PAC chair, I thought I'd pop in here. All of you know what is happening. That's in a few weeks. That's why we're having this webinar for you. But I do want to encourage you to make sure that you have a voice in Sacramento, and that the way that you can actually have an active voice is not just through Adopt a Ledge, like Janet mentioned, but also with your PAC dollars. So the PAC has in the past had a very successful rate of getting our supported candidates elected. In 2018, we had a 96% success rate. And as a PAC, we're actually a little bit behind in contributions this year, but we have supported quite a few candidates and caucuses that understand the value of the agent in the industry that we all work in. So I'm going to drop in the chat shortly a couple of links, one for the California State PAC. For those of you that aren't aware, Faith will be talking about it soon, but we are going to have a bit of a mountain to climb. As agents in this state, we have a lot of work to do to preserve our industry in the next couple of years. And then I'll also drop a link for HUPAC, which is our national PAC that contributes at the federal level. So based on what Marcy just told you, anything involving healthcare, that's going to be a big deal as to who gets elected both in the House and the Senate. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn over control to Faith.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to do the screen share. Hope it works better than last time. Can you confirm you can see my slides?
Yes,
We're
thank
good?
you, Faith.
Okay, excellent. Happy to be here today. I'm Faith Borges. I am one of your legislative advocates, or lobbyists, if you will, serving the California Association of Health Underwriters in Sacramento. My office is just across the street from the Capitol, but like many of you, I am working from home today, sitting at my dining room table. I also work with Mike Belote, who many of you may know. He's the president of California Advocates, the oldest contract lobbying firm in Sacramento. So a little bit about where we are in terms of the legislative calendar. The legislature has adjourned for the year. Here in California, the assembly members, very similar to Congress, run every 2 years. And so they operate on a 2-year cycle. That cycle has concluded, and now we wait for the election season to see who's going to be returning as a new class. That can include older legislators and then obviously freshmen coming in, particularly in cases of filling seats that are left open due to term limits, which we have here in California. We have 12 years, so something a little different from the federal government. But the legislature adjourned the end of August, and then the governor has 30 days to sign bills here. We call that the signing period, where he can sign legislation or veto it. There is a third option that's not really utilized in modern times, which is to let something become law without a signature. But for the most part, governors like to take credit for what they sign into law or what they kill. But that is a third option. And then I've bolded here, really the next deadline that we're all looking forward to, maybe being over, is the November election. So at this time, the federal government's obviously going to be holding elections from president on down, which you just heard from Marcy, but we also have a number of statewide races. So the assembly, which is our equivalent of Congress here in the state, our lower house, if you will, has 80 seats and they're up for re-election. So lots of stuff going on there. Your down ticket races certainly matter. This is a very big state in terms of, financial resources that are available. I've heard something like we're the 5th largest economy in the world. So certainly who spends your local dollars is very significant. And then also in the Senate, we have 40 members. So half of the membership of the assembly, and they alternate in terms of who's running. So about half of those seats are up. And then when it's a non-presidential year, which this is a presidential year, then we have our statewide elected officials. So Governor Newsom, down the line, insurance commissioner, run at that time. So the elections were really driving a lot of the politics that we see in election years. You see people wanting to make sure they fulfill campaign promises. Oftentimes as a lobbyist, something I find frustrating, but a reality is it's very difficult to talk to people about the policy of an issue because they're very concerned with the politics of an issue. So where their supporters are, where their dollars are coming from, how does this issue look if it's diluted down to its simplest point on a mailer, in a commercial? So things that are very complex get filtered through a political lens in an election year, which this was certainly that way, primarily around COVID. And then the legislature, once that election takes place, the new legislature will be sworn in December, but basically it's a photo opportunity. Usually their kids get to walk around the floor and then they go home for the holidays and really begin work January of next year. And it's important to note that in California, all of the bills that are signed into law, unless otherwise explicitly stated, take effect January of the next year. So this period where they're out of session, we call the interim, is really also a ramp up period where professionals like yourselves are finding out what became law so that they can coach clients, educate themselves on the issues. And so when looking at just kind of big picture legislative calendar, like Marcy said, COVID really drove everything. So we have really early 2020, the state was in fantastic economic shape with a $6 billion surplus. The legislature had a lot of ideas about how to spend that money. Then mid 2020, certainly all of that changed. The budget tanked and the state was expecting a $54 billion deficit. Those numbers have since improved, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And then late 2020 is predominantly driven by these elections. So we are ready to get this year over with. GGAHU, as I mentioned, had a lot of key bills when we started the legislative year or in those good budget times, right? So expansions of healthcare in terms of benefits or who's covered are very expensive. So they were certainly candidates for the state to spend that $6 billion surplus. But what ended up happening, well, actually, I'm going to pause there. So at the beginning of the year, we did see proposals for Medi-Cal expansion. California proposed to cover undocumented extending beyond the age of 26, which we currently have. The legislature in their budget proposals wanted to cover everyone regardless of immigration status and regardless of age. The governor was a little bit more tempered in his approach. He was hoping to cover undocumented seniors over age 65. It's very common for the legislature and the governor, particularly in times like now where they're the same party, to fight amongst themselves about which is the best way to address this. So this is something that they had been debating early on in the year. And then we also saw benefit expansions as a number of proposals to increase things like coverage for in vitro fertilization, for various cancer screenings, for additional benefits for behavioral health. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about single payer as well. But what ended up happening with both the benefit expansion and the Medi-Cal expansion, all of those were shelved for better budget times. When you tank down to a $54 billion deficit, the state can't deficit spend. So it actually goes into kind of a crisis mode, into what I would call like keep the lights on budget. So no new expansions of benefits are really on the table. And then it really comes about how do we fulfill our existing obligations. And there were no legislative attempts this year for single payer. We haven't seen any formally since SB 562 a few years ago. And that's in large part due to a commission that is studying the issue that I will talk about in just a few slides. So that topic was really shelved. So we, as an association, were left with two key bills that we were tracking that were signed into law. AB 2157 by Dr. Wood, who's the chair of the healthcare committee, and he represents the area in the North Coast. So any of our members that are joining us from there. He had a bill on the independent dispute resolution process, which seems really wonky. This is a process that was created in California's legislation to try to reduce balance billing a few years ago, AB 72. What Dr. Wood found and what proponents of the bill, I believe it's sponsored by the anesthesiologists, was that nobody was really utilizing the process because providers and plans didn't want to share the information about their balance bill, which is the topic that this is trying to reduce, which we're very supportive of. The provider and the plan may not want to share the information with the other. So as part of the existing independent dispute resolution process under AB 2157 that was signed into law, the provider and the plan can share information with kind of the mediator confidentially and get a resolution. So anesthesiologists are the primary users of the independent dispute resolution process. As many of you have probably seen, they make up a large portion of balance bills to begin with. It's very hard for plans to get the contracts with them. So we were supportive of this effort with anything that takes the consumer out of the middle. There should be a process for plans and providers to negotiate with a third party that doesn't involve balance billing the consumer. So this was signed into law. So now both parties can submit information confidentially, to try to get a favorable outcome. And then SB 852 is dealing with prescription drug affordability, which has been a big topic both at the state level and nationally. And this bill was signed. This is by Dr. Pan, who is the chair of the Senate Healthcare Committee, which briefly as an aside, I do want to note that that committee called an informational hearing yesterday to discuss the future of the ACA and what the state will do if the lawsuit that Marcy's talking about earlier, if the courts do find it to be unconstitutional, and agents were invited to participate. So we actually had an agent panelist that gave comment. I gave comment as well, but it was great to have a seat at the table and talk about the gains in the ACA that are great for agents in terms of not having to underwrite somebody based on their health, and how having those meetings could be incredibly challenging before when you had no option for somebody. So being able to have options is fantastic in terms of those provisions. So there was comment given there. But back to the issue of prescription drugs, this administration on Governor Newsom's very first day, as you'll see it stated there when he was sworn into office, January 7th, gave a statement, and he had a number of executive orders, which isn't something that we commonly saw in California under Governor Brown. So it's been really kind of a linchpin piece of this administration to do a lot of executive orders at the state level. And executive orders are really doing things that you have authority over anyways and kind of doing it publicly. So this governor made healthcare. He campaigned on it, and then also took a number of actions on his first day, including calling for a first in the nation drug bulk purchasing program. And since then, California and a number of other Western states have looked at the possibility of producing even a state label of generic drugs. But the bill that I just mentioned, SB 852, has the state looking at options for partnering with a manufacturer, a drug manufacturer, or contracting with one to produce at least 10 generic drugs that become made available, and not just to state programs or even public programs, but become available. The objective is to everyone, including public and private employers, insurers, to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. And they also have a request for this new commission to look at insulin costs as well, which has been a challenge here. So there's a number of other provisions in terms of, asking the federal government for waivers for single payer, establishing a new position, a California Surgeon General, which is something we hadn't seen before, and then also working with the Healthy California for All Commission. So SB 852 is really the legislative codification of the governor's initial intent to look at producing generic drugs in the state, and that was signed into law. So it's really kind of an exploratory committee on seeing if they can do those 10 drugs, including insulin, and then also report back with what issues they face. So that was signed into law. I do want to talk briefly, especially for those of you who may not participate in regular GGAHU meetings, a huge legislative victory that we saw continue to play out throughout this year. A couple of years ago, the California Supreme Court issued a ruling, the Dynamics, or Dynamics is now the more common pronunciation, was a trucking company. And this ruling that the California Supreme Court did looked at who should be an independent contractor and who should be a W-2 employee. And as many of you know, many agents are independent contractors, but this law changed provisions. It created a very strict test on who can be an independent contractor, and it took 19 previous factors, referred to as the Borello standard for anybody that really wants out, and it distilled it down to 3 provisions commonly referred to as the ABC test. And it said that you can no longer be an independent contractor if you're in the same industry as the employer. Well, hello, insurance are in the same industry as every insurance carrier. And then even within agencies, there were a lot of independent agents. But we were able, as an association, to negotiate for the legislative codification of that bill, which is AB 5, to get an exemption for agents, so that you can continue to operate independently without having to become a captive agent with one insurance company. Just the logistics of that would be a nightmare. We know agents have, some folks were telling me, 40 1099s. Who could they even become an employee of? And so that's a really tangible example of your membership in an association that gave agents a specific voice to solve a specific problem for this industry. So the conversation with Dynamics continued to play out this year with a number of other industries attempting to get a carve out, if you will, so that they can continue to operate independently. And certainly among those, you'll see a lot of advertisements right now for Prop 22, which is Uber and Lyft and the gig economy trying to get exempt, because having to conform strictly with the new standard created by Dynamics presents obviously challenges for a number of industries, and insurance would have been one of those. So really want to highlight that throughout all the bills this year, attempting to get exempt, we didn't have to participate this year because we had an exemption we got last year through this association. So if you like being independent, you are benefiting from the work of GGAHU. So now looking at, you like my crazy 2020 brain, this just felt right when I was looking for templates. So I want to talk a little bit about what has happened in healthcare this year. And as Sue mentioned, there's really a lot going on. The Healthy California for All Commission was created a couple years ago through some budgetary action. And this commission started earlier this year. So again, in very good economic times, went to a first meeting in person, which feels like a lifetime ago in terms of attending hearings in person. But they've actually just recently announced that they are taking a hiatus until February of next year. And that's a different timeline than we were previously expecting. This commission was created to have informational kind of gathering from stakeholders throughout healthcare, the nurses, the doctors, Peter Lee, our healthcare committee chairs, various departments, various academic type of members. These commissioners are appointed by the Assembly leadership, the Senate leadership, and predominantly by the governor. They were supposed to be coming up with solutions for achieving universal health care, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And they were to submit 2 reports. So let's first talk about what this commission is. And I realize this is a lot of words, which I don't like to put on my slides, but I think the words in these particular cases, I've pared them down from a 100-page report, which I actually would encourage you to take a look at. There's a lot of phenomenal information in terms of who's currently insured, how they're insured, how it's paid for, what the statistics are. My coffee pot is going off, sorry about that. With there's a lot of great information. So I'm going to start with the commission's objective because I think the wording is really important. So they will work to develop a plan for advancing progress towards achieving a healthcare delivery system for California that provides coverage and access through a unified financing system, including but not limited to a single payer financing system. So there is kind of some emphasis on single payer, but they were specific in their wording to not be exclusively creating a system that's single payer, particularly at the state level. They were supposed to provide, as I said, 2 reports, the first of which was supposed to be in July. It actually ended up being August. And then the second report, it was supposed to be February of next year, which is when they're on hiatus until. And my suspicion before they went on hiatus was that the second report was going to contain options that coincided with legislative deadlines to introduce legislation for 2021. And I thought that would be the roadmap forward that the legislature was going to pursue in terms of making those changes. Now that they're not coming back until February, I think there may be a little less action. Early on in the year, we could still see gut and amended bills later in the session. The California legislature in its first year of a session will go until mid-September or so. So depending on when that report actually comes out, we could see a very short timeline to try to address some of the recommendations of the report. This first report was really just about who's currently covered, what the options and barriers will be, which I'll talk about in just a few slides, to achieving this type of a system at the state level. And so the last thing that I think is important to point out, specifically using their words, is understanding what they mean by unified financing and what those 3 objectives are that they're going to do to achieve that. So the report uses the term describing a statewide system and to arrange and assure healthcare in which does 3 things. All Californians would be entitled to receive a standard package of healthcare services, okay? Entitlement would not vary by age, employment status, disability status, income, or other characteristics, okay? And then this is, I think, the most important one, distinctions among Medicare, Medi-Cal, employment-sponsored insurance, individual market coverage would be eliminated within the system. So distinctions between all of those systems will be eliminated, i.e. now we're looking at something more like SB 562, which called for the elimination of those programs to be substituted by only one option, a true single payer system. So this is not what we've commonly come to refer to as universal health care, which is something we support, a system in which everybody has health insurance. We want people to be insured. We want people to have access to health care that's quality and affordable. But elimination of these programs is something very different. So how is it being done? So the legislature created the commission, as I mentioned, through the budgetary action a few years ago. The commission is creating reports, but those reports are not law. Those reports will be used by the legislature to create legislation and or ballot initiatives, which I'll talk to you about why those would be necessary to make these reforms. And then also Californians would be voting on those ballot initiatives. But in addition to the significance of voting on the initiative itself, it will make a huge difference in terms of who is in the White House and who is in Congress and the Senate in terms of approving a lot of necessary funding. So SB 562 as an example, because it's the most recent we have in terms of a model here in the state, did have something that proponents and opponents agree on, which is not common, but everybody agrees that the system would cost about $400 billion a year, which is about 3 times our current state budget. So in order to meet those funding requirements, you would need to essentially absorb every federal dollar that the state currently receives through programs like the VA, through Medicare, through Medicaid. So who is in the White House and who has leadership in those houses that Marcy was talking about will play a big difference in terms of the outcome. But as you also heard, the Biden administration is, out of all of the Democratic candidates that were running earlier on, arguably the least progressive in terms of upending the system The Biden administration is very proud of the Affordable Care Act, bearing the name Obamacare from that administration that he previously served in. So I think it would still be a very tough road ahead to get a blank check from even a quote unquote favorable administration for the state to move forward with this. But nonetheless, those election outcomes will matter. And then I am going to talk to you about some key races here in the state as well, because the legislature will be having a role in what happens here at the state level. So obviously the federal races, Marcy just explained beautifully, but I do want to add an additional note. If we do see a Biden-Harris administration, something that will happen here in California is we will have the potential for musical chairs. Because Senator Harris is currently California senator, there would be a vacancy there, and the governor would have the authority to place a new person in our Senate role. And that could, if he pulls from other elected offices, we know, I think the Secretary of State, the Attorney General are names that come up commonly, then those seats would need to be backfilled as well. So we may see a little shifting of statewide officials here. And then also on the congressional side, we do have a couple of key races. These are not in your area, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but in the Central Valley, that continues to be kind of a hot spot for flipping seats back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. Very close party representation there. And then also the Christy Smith, Mike Garcia seat down in Southern California. These are really the most contested and likely to go either or. So if you did live in those areas, you'd be seeing a lot of money hitting your area. And then the California State Senate, so not the federal one, our state level, we do have a couple key races here as well. Dave Cortese and Ian Ravel are the closest to your area in the South Bay. This is a seat that has been, it's open because it has a member that termed out. Ian Ravel is kind of the more moderate member of the two. It's a Dem on Dem seat because in the Bay Area, that's what you're more likely to see, which as a dynamic is something that I think is kind of unique to California. In California, our legislative makeup is such that we have more than a 2/3 supermajority Democrat to Republican makeup of our legislature. So you heard in Congress how it could really go either way. You see leadership change back and forth throughout the sessions, not so in California. In fact, we're really seeing the development of kind of a 4-party system. And I would argue that it's Republicans, independents, which actually in California, Republicans and independents have been switching places in terms of the party registration, in terms of population. So until very recently, there were more independents registered in California than Republicans. So those two, and then also the Democratic Party is kind of splitting into two. Your more moderate Democrats and then your progressive Democrats. And I think from the top on down, that's something that's been very apparent in California. California didn't even support the Biden administration. California elected Bernie Sanders during our primary race here. So a very progressive movement that's really defining itself within the Democratic Party itself. So those are kind of the 4 I'm proposing. So this is a Dem on Dem seat with, and actually though receiving the endorsement from President Obama. I think she's the only local race to receive an endorsement because she worked in that administration. And in Brown's administration, she was appointed to be the head of the FPPC, which is our political reporting agency that kind of tracks money stewardship among candidates here. So she's really kind of viewed as a regulator and a reformer. So that's the South Bay seat. Abigail Medina and Rosaliche Ocho Bogue again are a Senate seat down in Southern California, Dem and Reap. And then the Orange County seat, Senate District 29, it's pretty exciting. Orange County was a Republican stronghold until very recently, very, very red, kind of still hyped up on the Reagan era type of Republican politics. And then we've seen a pretty significant swing in the last few years. And this seat, I think, certainly reflects that. Ling Chang held the seat as a Republican. She was taken out by Josh Newman, who was then recalled because of his vote to increase the gas tax, and Ling Chang replaced him, and now they're running against each other again. So a ton of money being spent down in Orange County, and really anyone's guess in terms of the outcome. And then Senator John Morlock and Daveman, again, another Orange County seat where the Republican incumbents, are bolded. Those are the distinctions there. If it's not bolded, it's because it's an open seat. Republican fighting for his seat pretty significantly. And then in the assembly, which has twice as many members, it's actually, I would consider it like the scrappier house, in part because they run every 2 years. They're kind of always campaigning. You have a lot of people coming in and out. There's a Stockton seat, Assembly District 13, that interestingly enough, even though it's in the Valley, is Dem on Dem. So I think a bit of a change there. And then some Southern California races. The only other one that I'm going to talk about, interestingly enough, Assembly District 59, is a fight between the Black and the Latino caucuses with Dem on Dem. The area of LA is now shifting over to a more Hispanic population. And so they're making a run at more progressive Reggie Jones Sawyer. So trying to take out the incumbent from their own side. So that's been a really interesting dynamic in California, is that moderate caucus versus the progressive caucus. And as it pertains to your interest specifically, the progressive caucus is obviously very supportive of things like single payer, and the moderate caucus is far more financially conservative. So they're often backed by business groups and have a little bit more anti-tax philosophy than a tax and spend progressive may be inclined. So I do want to talk quickly about some terminology because it's going to be flying around and it's being used interchangeably and it's vastly different. So before everybody freaks out that the Healthy California for All Commission is just going to input, single payer, I think some terminology used by the governor himself is really important to understand. On his first day in office, when I showed you that press release and said that he asked the federal government for some leeway in terms of resources for the state to spend, and that that money is essential because at the state level, despite what some of you may think, we cannot deficit spend. The federal government can, but the state government has to borrow and balance its budget every year. So that's why having a single payer system at the state level is incredibly challenging, because in hard times such as COVID, that we saw a very quick shift, the state would be having to balance its resources with things like education, public safety, roads, and healthcare, and you have to balance that. So needing that federal money is really critical to making sure that your system is healthy and sustainable in terms of finances. But Governor Newsom in his letter asked House leadership and President Trump for the ability to have that flexibility with resources and some waivers, but he referenced a single payer model like Medicare. Medicare is not a single payer model at all, as you all know very well. There's a lot of options, there's a lot of payers, there's a lot of levels, you can add additional coverage, which is something that's very different than what's being talked about with the commission, who is saying things like SB 562 said, which is that no other insurance plan would be allowed to exist outside of the sole single payer system. And knowing that that's really challenging to do at the state level, there were even some crazy ideas in the report about making it illegal for providers to accept payment outside of the single payer system, which I don't know how you do that without having a mass exodus of physicians, which candidly we already have a problem with in the state in terms of access. So that is pretty important to know, that sometimes when the Newsom administration is talking about single payer, it may not be single payer as we envision it, it's more like Medicare. And then some other terminology as we do use it, we look at single payer as a true single payer system like SB 562. And the example I give is the DMV. There's no option for registration to pay anybody else to have the ability to move your vehicle. It's just the state. This would be a single payer system. And then Medicare for All is something more like the Medicare program, where you have people purchasing and paying into it, and you can have contributions and you can pick levels of plans. So also, I hope to be encouraging to you in that report, which I do give a link to being able to get to the report in just a few slides, which I am winding down. The title of the report is here. It's an environmental analysis, yada, yada. It's the first report, but I do want to highlight section 2 of the report, which we're referring to as the wet blanket. Pardon me while I take a sip of coffee. I've been talking a long time. Okay, the wet blanket talks about what some of the obstacles would be to the state level program. So federal law and regulation would be required for the state to receive those Medicare and Medicaid dollars. So there's some federal stuff that would need to happen. There are also ERISA limitations because of employer benefit programs that operate across state lines are federally preempted. So you would again have to have some federal action dealing with ERISA plans, and self-insured is a big part of that. And then also there's constraints on California raising and spending revenue. And something that I think is really interesting as we go into this election season, you see a lot of propositions in California, very common. Propositions cannot be undone unless you have another proposition. And it's incredibly expensive to take something to the ballot, to qualify it with signatures, to run all those campaign ads, especially right now because you can't really do door-to-door campaigns. People are really, really reliant on that messaging. And when you have as many propositions as we do, that commercial space is incredibly expensive. So in California, we have something called Prop 98, which guarantees that of all of the tax dollars that come into the state, there's a guaranteed amount in terms of a percentage, 40 to 50% goes straight to education. So any new money that you're going to raise has that carve out to be going towards education. So you would have to get an exemption from that, which would be very challenging from the school side, because that's kind of Prop 98 is like the holy grail to guarantee their funding. And then also we have something called the GAN limit that was done through a ballot proposition, which again, you may not know. California has limits on how much the state can increase its spending and how much they can increase taxes and things like that. And the GAN limit controls that. So they would have to go back to the ballot and also change the GAN limit. So you would need there to be a number of provisions. And then also, because of that $400 billion price tag, even if you get all of the state, or excuse me, even if you get all the federal money, you still have to raise the other half, which would pretty much guarantee a tax increase. And legislators, even in a state as blue as ours, are a little reluctant to pass the type of taxes that would be necessary to institute a true single payer system, especially because SB 562 called for no cost sharing, no premiums, no deductibles, no anything. And it covered not just healthcare, vision, dental, the works, workers' compensation, everything would be through the system. And a lot of the financial reports we saw were really interesting. They, even with no deductibles and no cost sharing, didn't account for any increases in utilization, which seemed very unrealistic. So that $400 billion doesn't even account for somebody who would likely increase their utilization. So that I think would likely go to a ballot proposition as well. And getting somebody to increase their own taxes, which would likely be necessary, is obviously a big hurdle for implementing this system, especially when the benefits become very unclear and seem a little, they sound good, they sound great, but who knows? So I'm going to quickly wrap up with what we can do. Joining GGAHU, I know this is the time of like a webinar where people want to tune out, but please tune in, just focus with me for a little bit of time. Having an agent association to represent not only you and your agency and your livelihood, but also your clients. Having a leveraged consumer advocate that can go to bat for them when there are questions and when disputes arise is critical. And if you don't do it, your mailman's not going to do it, your grocer's not going to do it, there will be no voice. It is a small amount of money to consider when you consider that it is the only advocacy that will happen for this portion of the industry. SB 562 specifically wrote out insurance agents, and they had some really condescending language in there about they were going to have to provide state funding for job retraining for everybody that loses their jobs. Okay, unless you want to be in a job retraining line, you need to participate in the state's fight for the future of healthcare, for your families, for your employees, for everybody that you fight for to have access to healthcare that's affordable. Participate in this association. It's imperative. If you don't, nobody will. You need to get other agents to do it as well. Come to Capitol Conference. It makes a difference when legislators see from people My comments to the Senate Health Committee yesterday included, agents are the faces of Covered California. You can't just have this program and you can't just give people insurance. You have to help people utilize their insurance, and you need a person to talk to, answer questions. No matter what system you're in, will still be, disputes about what's a covered service, what isn't, answering questions. There will always be paperwork. There will always be obstacles with financing. They need an agent. So please come up and show the legislature that you took time away from your family, from your business, because it's important and you're a person. It humanizes this industry, which it's more human than I think people like to recognize. This is about a person sitting across from a person, making sure they're going to have access to a life-saving service. And if for whatever reason you're averse to becoming a member, give to PAC. You don't have to be a member to give to PAC. If you are a supporter of tangential services in this industry, you should contribute to the fight that that agents are doing things like that Dynamex exemption are possible because of this association and because of the relationships that have been formed with legislators who know the value of an agent. So it's important to give to PAC and make sure, as Sue said, we are very, very diligent and good stewards of every dollar received. We have a high 90th percentile success rate of making sure that somebody is elected who has a relationship with agents and who understands that you're not just the insurance company, that you are the consumer's advocate on their behalf, and working to keep costs down with our partners in the insurance agencies to provide, resources and make sure quality care is available to everyone. And then there's also protecthealthcare.org that can be joined, and it's circled here, the protecthealthcare.org. It's been a little dark because SB 562 has been the last issue a few years ago, but it's a partnership of health insurance plans and medical providers through the CMA, nursing associations, and agents that make sure that people understand not just the cost of this type of a system, but really the disruption that it would be in care with people's providers fleeing and things of that nature. California has done a great job in terms of adopting an exchange and reducing the uninsured rate. And so having collective voices that say, I'm in this industry and I am concerned with something like SB 562, blowing it up for the detriment of the consumer, what would be at stake is a lot. So there's a coalition you can sign up on. And then this would be the slide you want to take a picture of. There is information at GGAHU.org. There's a great members only section that has a lot of resources and talking points to explain these complex issues to your clients, to your friends, to your family, to yourself, making sure that you feel comfortable understanding what's going on. The bill information that I mentioned, if you had questions about those, any bills are available at leginfo.legislature.ca.gov. GGAHU's webpage is there. You can email GGAHU if you have questions. My email's there if you have questions. And then the report is available at the Healthy California for All link. I don't know if you can see my little mouse right here. So I'll hang out for a little bit of time for questions and answers, but I really appreciate you making some time during an incredibly busy season to make sure that you're educated and you're participating. So I am very, very humbled by you showing up to hear me talk. So thank you.
Thanks, Faith. So we know some of you have to drop off. We totally understand that. But since Faith has been gracious enough to hang around for a few more minutes, if you do want to hang out for the Q&A, we do realize we're past our end time, but we'll extend that out a little bit so Faith can answer some questions. Also, if you look in the chat, there are several links in there. One to the GGAHU Foundation. We do have an education foundation that is consumer facing. There also is a link in there for the GGAHU PAC. And also, I did include a link in there for you to download. Some of you may have seen it already, the file of the Healthy California report. You can download that for if you have insomnia, you can download that to read that. I did want to call on Janet Powelson and let her unmute. She did have a question for you, Faith.
If you want to be so kind, Faith, to share our conversation yesterday, just want to call it out to folks, right? With the recent federal extension, once again, of the employer ACA mandate employer filing, California, with its own individual mandate, has an employer reporting requirement as well. And that deadline does not sync with the federal extension.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. I did check, thank you for your inquiry. I did check with the Franchise Tax Board, and what I was told is that they do not have authority through the regulatory process to change dates. And so we're out of session right now, so the legislature can't change the dates. So they are unable to change dates to conform. But with a little bit of a read between the lines tone, there is zero penalty, and it will not, there is zero penalty.
So get your filings in, and if it's late, there's likely that you won't be penalized for that. But just make your clients aware, right? And remind them, California does have a filing requirement, and they have not extended the deadline. And they only want to be filing for their California resident employees and or the California resident dependents that were covered on their plans.
Did anyone else? Oh, go ahead,
Can
Pat.
you just kind of go through that a little bit? The filing, I think that's stuff that a lot of folks might not have, that might not have been top of mind for people. So just, what additional requirements are there from the regular filing, and where does it go down to, and all that kind of stuff? How many lives?
I think Janet is probably better to answer that than I just got a question.
I knew Janet would know.
Thanks. So,
ask an agent.
I know, there you go, exactly. So if you have fully insured coverage for your employees, then the carriers will be handling the filing for you as they do at the federal level. So the main difference here, thanks Pat for calling out the size, whereas the federal only applies for 50 full-time plus full-time equivalent, it makes you an applicable large employer. California, it's all sizes. So if you are that rare breed that has a self-funded policy and you are under that 50 life threshold and haven't been subject to the federal reporting, you are subject to the California reporting. Our recommendation is you work with your payroll vendor to put together that reporting on your behalf. Hopefully you can coordinate if you have an online benefit enrollment system. That vendor will coordinate with your payroll vendor to produce the forms for your submission to the state. I actually don't have off the top of my head where it goes, but and John, as task, do they have any involvement with vendors? Are you coordinating?
We definitely do at the state level and some federal level, but yes, and from our side we're agnostic, so we'll work with anyone. We're taking directly from payroll companies and from all Ben admin systems.
So yes, definitely, you're going to encourage your clients to reach out now to their vendors to begin collecting that data if they haven't already been tracking on that data.
Did anyone else have any questions? We still have Faith. All right, well, I don't see any. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Make sure you go out and vote. You may want to actually drop your ballot off as opposed to dropping it in the mail. But go out and vote. and make sure that you are talking to your clients about what we talked about today. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. If you have any questions, please email any of us that are on the board. You can go to our website, GGAHU.org. We thank GGAHU, and we also thank GGAHU for joining us today as well. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much. And Faith, again, happy anniversary to you and Josh. Bye, everyone. Thank you.